With me, I still have Professor Bola Akintenuwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and Professor David Awurawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. U.S. President Joe Biden this week invited leaders from across the African continent to Washington, D.C. for the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. The American leader believes that U.S. collaboration with African leaders as well as civil society, business, diaspora, women, and youth leaders is essential to unlocking the potential of this decisive decade. Meanwhile, President Biden's vision of a progressive Africa was instantly tempered by the remarks of his Nigerian guest, President Muhammadu Buhari, who during the closing session of the three-day summit warned that Africa risks not being able to attain the goals set for the continent by 2063, owing to challenges including terrorism, coup d'etat, and climate change. State House correspondent of Arise News, Adesua Omorwan, who is on the ground in the United States, filing this report from Washington, D.C.
It's the third and final day of the summit. Dubbed the Leaders' Day, President Buhari joins other leaders at two separate sessions. One on the African Union's Agenda 2063 blueprint to transform the continent over the next 5 decades, and the other on ensuring food security. President Biden, in his opening remarks, reiterates America's wish of equitable development, strengthened ties, and more investment.
That's why over the next 3 years, working in close cooperation with the United States Congress, we plan to commit $55 billion in Africa to advance the priorities we share and to support the Agenda 2063. And today I'm also calling for the African Union to join the G20 as a permanent member of the G20. It's been a long time in coming, but it's going to come.
In turns, African leaders welcomed America's commitment, but also shared their concerns. For President Buhari, the multiple challenges of climate change, terrorism, transnational organized crime, and the rise in coups undermine the continent's aspiration of the 2063 agenda. The Nigerian president is, however, optimistic that the challenges are surmountable through solidarity. He also calls for strengthening of African Union's mediating support and conflict prevention mechanisms as antidote to emerging intra- and interstate resurgence of conflicts on the continent. In his address, the president of Senegal and the African Union, while making a case for sanctions to be lifted in Zimbabwe, criticizes pending U.S. legislation countering malign Russian activities in Africa, describing it as unfairly targeting Africa.
We are concerned, Mr. President, by the American bill on economic and trade between your country and foreign powers. This bill, with its sanctions, which targets a whole continent, is the first in international relations. Africa is asking why such a bill exists and why Africa is targeted.
As the curtains fall on the second U.S. summit in 8 years, African leaders here say the fight against terrorism and hunger, inclusive and just world governance, debt relief, sustained development of infrastructure, as well as the inclusive and a just world governance remain the priority of the continent. Adesua Omorwan, Arise News.
Okay, so much to take away from the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit that just ended in Washington, D.C. But let's start from the basics. There are commentators who have said that, look, all of this is about the scramble for Africa, a repeat of the 1885 situation. France is looking towards Africa. China is ahead of many other countries. UK post-Brexit is signing new agreements with African countries. Turkey is looking at Africa. Even Vietnam is doing a long neck, saying there are opportunities in Africa. And the United States, that will seem to have lost out in that race is coming back to reiterate the point about the importance of Africa as a last frontier, or, if you like, the new frontier, depending on the perspective from which you are looking at it. But let's discuss this first before we go back to football and the issues about inflation in Nigeria. And we are privileged to have Professor Akinterenwa, who is a professor of international relations, and also Professor David Awurawa, who is also in the same field. So, I mean, we can treat this right away in-house. But let me start with you, Professor Akinterenwa, with this specific issue of the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. And some people saying, why do African leaders always have to go to U.S. or France or to Beijing to discuss Africa? Why are they not the ones inviting Biden and co, who are interested in Africa, to come to Africa, to come and find African solutions to African problems?
You see, let's begin with the comment of President Muhammadu Buhari. He said, he theorized that the likelihood of AU Agenda 2063, the objectives may not be attained, and using the argument of terrorism and things like that. I think that observation can be considered secondary. It's actually non-attainability of the objectives cannot be because of terrorism. I want to believe that the critical obstacle to the non-achievement of AU objectives, either by 2030 or 2063, it is simply because of the conflicting interests of the major powers of the world. And you have rightly pointed to some of the indicators. You asked, why is it that it is only the big powers that are inviting and not the contrary? Why is it that African leaders, even Nigeria, why is it that Nigeria cannot single-handedly invite them and then bring other African countries to there? And this one will now make me to look at this U.S. Africa Summit from a holistic perspective. And there are 4 critical levels of analysis. If you look at the first U.S. Africa Summit that took place in 2014 under Barack Obama, you will discover that the 2022 summit is just a little bit of improvement on that of 2014, especially in terms of commitment. Now, making commitments, making pledges is one thing. Fulfilling, the obligations is another. If you look at how Joe Biden has been presenting the pledges, he says very frequently that he will work with the Congress to do X, Y, Z. Now meaning, suggesting by implication that whatever he's presenting, pledging, is a function of the consent of the Congress. So the extent to which, for instance, the pledge of 55 billion, all right, is a function of that. He pledged $2 billion for food security, $100 million in terms of peace and security. And when you look at the concept of ADAPT there, that is African democratic and political transition. Now, he pledged 75 million. There are many. Food security, all these he made pledges. But they are largely a function of the position of the Senate. So in this case, I think that there's nothing wrong in seeking to review the U.S. policy on Africa, but the critical point at the first level of analysis is that the 2022 U.S.-Africa Summit is a lot of improvement on that of the 2014. Now, in this case, for instance, indication has been given that Joe Biden will surely, in 2023, come with many cabinet members, and then to show a greater commitment. And when you look at other critical areas, you discover that the United States has been compelled to organize this summit. But when we come back to further discussion, I will raise the other levels of analysis and issues involved.
Okay, Professor Awurawo, it's good to have you right there on the program. You've listened to Professor Akintonowa. He has raised a number of issues, but some of the issues that are out there in the front burner would seem to include the Memorandum of Understanding signed with the African leaders with regard to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the AfCFTA. But the question you ask is that, well, what happened to AGOA, African Growth Opportunities Act? Why should we believe America in this regard with all the promises made? $5 billion to climate adaptation and health, $290 million to Power Africa project, and President Buhari himself even saying, oh, the just energy transition, we expect the United States to do this. But there was AGOA before all of this. What is the guarantee that any of these agreements will come to fruition?
Thank you very much. The reality is that there is no guarantee. That is the unfortunate thing. There is no guarantee at all. There is no guarantee, and we have history to back us on that. You have made reference to AGOA. AGOA was signed. It was supposed to make it a lot easier than previously for African countries to export different products to the United States. The US came up with so many conditionalities, standards to be met and all that. And that made it impossible for many African states to be able to take advantage of AGOA. All the pledges that President Biden has made, Congress has to approve a whole lot of those pledges. And we know how the American Congress functions. There is this toxicity, the division in Congress. The Republicans are already angry that, many of them are already angry that Biden is probably making too many promises, want to give too much to Africa. And so when some of these things get to Congress, you can be sure that they won't see light of day. Obama, who organized the first U.S.-African Leaders Summit in 2014, also made pledges. And the question we're asking is that, how far have those pledges, been met? There is also the issue of, the Power Africa project that Obama started. Not much has African countries benefited from the, Power Africa project. A few African countries here and there have made, marginal, gain marginally from it. Nigeria has gained practically nothing from that Power Africa project. And so when Professor Akintonowa and some others who have analyzed the summit and then drawn conclusions expressed skepticism regarding the fulfillment of those promises, they have good reasons to be skeptical, because promises like this have been made in the past that came to nothing. That nothing was achieved from it. The only positive in all of this is that there is increasing consciousness to engage Africa. There is increasing interest in engaging Africa. And of course, we should not also forget that Russia and China's interest in Africa and their expansion is one reason why all of a sudden, the United States want to, show more interest in Africa and articulate another policy to engage Africa so as not to just allow these other countries that are rivals to the United States, China and Russia, to dominate relations with Africa. So we have reasons to be skeptical regarding the possibility of fulfilling of these promises that the President Biden has made, to African leaders in the just concluded summit, in the United States.
Okay, Professor Awurawo, let me stay with you. On the sidelines of that summit, President Biden met with 6 African leaders whose countries are going to have, elections in 2023, including President Muhammadu Buhari. And at that meeting, we were told, according to a report by Garuba Show, that President Biden described President Buhari as a model and Nigeria as a model of democracy in Africa. Is that praise deserved? Have we earned it? Would we earn it?
Well, we haven't earned it, but we may earn it in 2023. The way the president has acted so far, it seems that he's determined to conduct a free, fair, and credible election. We have not earned it because 2019 election, I've said this several times, is not as free and fair as many have, portrayed it. I was part of that election. I was a returning officer in that election, so I know what I'm saying. President Buhari was contesting then, and so it wasn't really free and fair as people have tried to portray it. So we haven't earned it. But since he's not contesting 2023, and the way he has, carried on so far, it appears as if he's determined to conduct a free and fair election and add that to his whatever legacy, his legacy. So we haven't earned it, but it seems that we'll earn it. And it was good that the United States, Biden raised that issue because, elections that are not free and fair, fraudulent elections have been a major cause of conflict across Africa, and we know what the consequences have been. We had it in Cote d'Ivoire, we had it in Gambia, and all that. And so, by meeting with those leaders and getting them to, encouraging them to conduct free and fair election, and indicating that the United States is interested in these countries conducting free, fair, and credible election, is a positive, for the summit. And we hope that the African leaders to whom Biden spoke, 6 of them, will follow that path of ensuring that the elections are free and fair, to prevent conflicts in their respective countries, and to ensure that the leaders that emerge are those that the people want, and that will make for stability and development across the continent.
Well, Professor Awurawo, I get your point, particularly the point about you being a returning officer in the 2015 general or 2019 general elections. When next Mikey Guinea is on this program, I will ask him to tell us about the role that the professors have played as returning officers in managing Nigerian elections. Because I'm sure there are stories about the role you professors have played.
Let me make a comment on that, Dr. Abati.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to make a comment on that, Dr. Abati. Let me make a comment on that. I was under intense pressure in that election. Intense pressure. And I know what I'm saying, but I stood my ground. So the narrative that professors, help to rig election is not correct. If we are not there, to be a lot worse. I stood my ground. I know what I rejected to ensure that where I manned, the elections were free, fair, and credible. And so when I say the elections were not free, fair, and credible, as people try to portray it, I know what I'm saying. But let's just leave it like that.
Okay.
That professors do not collude to rig election as many have tried to. And I also have a number of colleagues who did as I did in that election.
Okay, thank you for defending the professors. Let's come to the professor here in the studio, Professor Akinterewa. Your point about President Buhari being a model of democracy in Africa.
Let's start from where Professor Awurawo stopped. In 2011, I was the returning officer.
You were also a returning officer?
Yes.
These professors are in good
Both for the
business.
gubernatorial elections that took place April 16th and the presidential election 2 weeks after. And I can tell you that if Professor Awurawa was under tension, I can tell you with my assistant, Ifeanyi Chibuike, with whom we were driving, when I wanted to go to toilet, I have to leave Yaba, go to Victoria Island to go and urinate or ease myself because of the tension. I insisted. The video, people can go. When field reports, figures were brought, I have to do the calculation myself and ensure that everything tallied very well. That was for the election of Babatunde Fashola. So in this case, I not only stood my ground, I was not listening to people trying to divert attention to come and take this, to come and eat. No, I didn't eat. I didn't go to toilet there in Yaba. We will just have a break and I quickly go back home and come. So the tension is there. The dignity of being an academic and being very objective, I think that one is quite good. Now, in terms of what our president said, when we say Nigeria is a model of democracy, fine. It's just a statement. A model as a statement can be hypothetical and it can be affirmative. In diplomacy, please, why will you expect a Joe Biden to confront President Buhari or to condemn his system? It's never done in diplomacy. You must tell him what his ears, his eardrums want to hear. So, please, there's no big deal about saying that Nigeria is a model of democracy. We are to ask ourselves, are we really a model of democracy? No. Please, the party in power in Nigeria had been accused by many opposition parties of already fraudulently preparing, a list of registered voters, quite different from the one established by INEC. Please, you can go and get the records where, for instance, from the document, you have different names. Male. Then you have the photograph of a woman there. Where you have a woman with records showing female, then you see a man put there. So when we are talking about democracy, are you saying that vote buying is part of the modeling? Are you now saying that all these fraudulent accusations, quote and unquote, the way we are going about that is as a system of federalism that we are practicing? We have a presidential system like that of the United States. Is it the way the Americans are going about theirs that we are going about our own? My own position on model, please, is not a big deal at all.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Awurawa. Thank you, Professor Akintonowa. At this point, we'll take another short break. And when we return, we'll be discussing the two other issues, the World Cup final between Argentina and France, and also inflation in Nigeria. And we'll probably take another topic before we wrap it up today. We'll be right back. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this Live Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News channel. With me, I still have Professor Bola Akintonowa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and Professor David Awurawa, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Well, just before we move on to the next major topic, I would like both you, Professor Akintenuwa and Professor Awurawo, to comment on the two topics we started with. The World Cup final between Argentina and France is ongoing. And I know, Professor Awurawo, you are a football aficionado. So I would like your comments, where you stand in this historic match. France, on the threshold of history, if France wins, France will have won back-to-back, like Italy in 1934 and 1938, and like Brazil in 1958 and 1962. But Argentina also wants to win. If Argentina wins, Lionel Messi will have made history. 5 World Cup appearances, 1 beyond Diego Maradona. He's already having 6 goals, 1 higher than Kylian Mbappe. And of course, there are persons who are already saying he's the greatest of all times. Let me start with you, Professor David Awurawo, and I would like your comment on this raging pandemic. Pandemic is a better word, of empty pockets in Nigeria, the erosion of purchasing power as indicated by inflation rate rising up to 21.47%, 6.07% higher year on year than where we were in November 2021.
Yeah, let me begin with the World Cup. It's been very exciting, as is expected to be. The World Cup is always a social celebration, so to speak, beyond the sport on the field itself. Millions of people, understandably up to 4 million people have gathered, have come in and out of Qatar, to be part of the World Cup. Different activities, the socializing, the engagement, the cheering of the players and all that. And of course, Aaron, the other time also talked about the money, how much, the winning team will go away with, and how much the others too, the runner-up and the third place and even the fourth place, what each one will get. All of those, were talked about the other time. So it's exciting. The final is ongoing. The final is ongoing, and Argentina is leading now by 2-0. It's the 72nd minute. It appears as if Argentina will win it. And so that would be good for Lionel Messi, who everybody seems to be, interested in, as far as those who support Argentina, and that if he wins the World Cup, that would be a cap. That would cap his illustrious career to be the greatest of all time. But the issue of who is the greatest of all time is always to mean a matter of perspective and who one likes, who the other one does not like. Maradona remains, the goals he scored in 1986 are goals that people still remember, So, if Argentina wins, and that, of course, that would be very good for Lionel Messi more than anybody else, who will likely be retiring from international football, that's playing for the national team. And that will give him something to show that distinguishes him from some others like Ronaldo, who they have compared him with over the years. We also talk about officiating. Yes, officiating has been poor in some matches. And where Argentina has played well, so if they win, people may not bother too much about the officiating. The penalty against Croatia for Argentina, of course, that is debatable. It's almost certainly not a penalty. The penalty also for Argentina against Poland, that also can never be a penalty. Things like that, and other errors here and there that referees have made. And as we always say, the worst match is one in which a referee's error determines the outcome. So FIFA needs to pay more attention to officiating so that there will not be controversy at the end of the day, especially when maybe a team wins with just 1 goal, and that 1 goal came from a dubious decision by the referee. So all of that, but all in all, the World Cup has been great. Mention was also made of Davido, who went to perform in the finals. That's also good. Good for Nigeria. Nigeria didn't qualify, but at least Nigeria is not forgotten. Nigeria is also a part of, the celebration beyond the play on the field. That is a positive. And of course, like Aaron also said, we hope that beyond performing, we'll also be part of the next one and do as well as Morocco has done, or even go further than Morocco has done, in the World Cup. We should also not forget Qatar. There were doubts, there was skepticism, and there were, people were disturbed about Qatar's ability to host the World Cup. The World Cup is ending today, and everything has gone rather smoothly, better than many had expected. So also, we should congratulate Qatar for, how it has masterfully, hosted the World Cup. But all in all, it's been a fantastic World Cup. And we can only congratulate the two finalists, Argentina and France, the hosts, and all that have been part of the celebrations in the past 1 month or so. And that is for the World Cup. Then for the economy, it seems that Dr. Muda was just speaking my mind, saying all that we have always said about the economy. It seems that those who are managing the economy, the CBN governor and some others who have been managing the economy through monetary policy, are detached from the reality. To begin with, the inflation of 21.47% is not real. The inflation will be somewhere around 50%. To just give an example, 2 days ago, I went to the supermarket to buy Dettol. It was 3,200. It used to be 1,050 naira, 1,100. What percentage is that? You remember that used to be 120. I bought it for 360. So when somebody comes and says it's 21.47%, it's just not the right. It's somewhere around 50%. But whatever the case, the solution that is found is what is important. And of course, the Naira itself, the redesigning. I've always expressed my, doubts as to what the CBN seeks to achieve. Changing the color of the Naira and all that. And like Mr. Muda, Dr. Muda also said, those they are targeting are the ones who have taken all the money away. I was at the bank on Friday, on Thursday, and then on Friday. I couldn't get the new notes. A colleague was able to get 45,000, and that was all we saw. People came in later. We were just told that the money was not available, and then they wanted to pay me old notes. I said, how can I go to a bank after the new notes were supposed to be available, and then you pay me very old and smelly notes? I rejected them, and they said until they have new notes, I won't collect. So we have all of these issues, but again, like Dr. Muda said, we should give CBN the benefit of the doubt. They have just started the process. It started on Thursday or so. Let's see how this week we have entered today, how it goes. But all in all, the CBN really needs to be more realistic in all the policies it adopts. And like the exchange rate, for instance, why should we have those multiple exchange rates? People who have connection can go to the bank and get the dollar at 400 and something, and then the thing exchanges for about 700 in the black market. And you have legitimate things to do. You go to the bank, they tell you that you cannot get foreign exchange. So these are the things that the CBN should be more concerned about, and not all those other superficial things that the CBN has been engrossed with. If cash is 6% of the total money that is circulating in Nigeria, what quasi money and the rest of them, why should there be so much interest and attention, and with so much money spent trying to redesign? So I agree almost entirely with the points that Dr. Muda made. He spoke like someone who understands the economy to the grassroots, not just elitist approach to managing the economy, which is a major reason why we are where we are in terms of our level of economic development.
Professor,
that moving forward, we'll do better in policies that will a lot better, and all of us will be happy for it.
Okay, Professor Awurawa, let's bring in Professor Akintenuwa into this conversation about the final match really of the World Cup, and also the inflation crisis in Nigeria. Professor Akintenuwa.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding the World Cup, 2 quick points. Point 1 is that, as I've said, we thank God that Morocco lost. But it is most unfortunate that Argentina will be winning. Most unfortunate. The common reason for my position is simply that, look, competition sporting events is supposed to be very healthy. My major concern is the attitudinal disposition of people from Argentina, people from Morocco. You see, this history, it's better not to have knowledge of certain things than having it and then rejoicing in saying XYZ is winning. When I look at what had happened, Argentinian policies, wiping out whole race, killing people, all those things. When I look at the attitudinal disposition of Morocco, being more Arab than African and all those things, saying that whatever they win, they will dedicate to the Arab world, not to Africa. So why are you rejoicing that they are succeeding all along? Look, let us always remember what Njoroge said in Weep Not Child. I think it's a novel by Jameson Ngugi, who later changed his name. Njoroge said a black man is never a black man, but a white man is always a white man. Now, it's not a question of liking or hating, etc. But black people, African people are complaining of non-development, yet they cannot give themselves identity. That's my position on that. Now,
Prof, before you move on, I just heard now that France has scored via a free kick. So the scoreline now is 2-1.
Well,
To Argentina, France 1. Okay, not a free kick, a penalty, but it's now 2-1. And we have President Macron there on his feet.
good.
So,
Well, you see,
it's now in fact 2-2. It's now 2-2. At this point on this program,
very good.
It's now 2-2.
France
so
will
the
win.
game is on.
Yes, if God be with you, who can be against you? You see, people who are against black people, me, I will always fight them. I am proud. James Brown said, say it loud. I am black and proud. So people should not see us as an animal relating to us, all those things. But you see, the beauty of it all as of today is that the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, with Ambassador Segun Odegbami, they have come up with what they call sports diplomacy. And they are targeting 2034, that Nigeria, being the epicenter, should ensure that the whole ECOWAS community should play host to the World Cup 2034. And they have been doing that. So we should be more interested in this than those who are currently winning. You see, the critical point there is that Segun Odegbami, as far back as 2006 or 2002, he has been working, asking FIFA to ensure that Africa, particularly Nigeria, should be given the opportunity to host. The whole of West Africa supported him. Only Nigeria, to which he belongs, did not support. So why are you supporting outsiders and you set aside your own? So in this case, I think that this is the material time that Reuben Abati and all others should come out and ask Segun Odegbami with Egosa Osagai, the NIDG, to come and expatiate on this particular project. Now, on inflation, I share a bit of the sentiments of Professor Awurawo, but I do not agree fully with the submission of Muda Yusuf. His analysis were fantastic. I agree to an extent with many of his points, but he said that redesigning the currency is not a solution. That having more cash outside is not even a solution to the problem. My major quarrel is that Dr. Abati and Dr. Yusuf relied and believed heavily on the position of European analysts. You believe in their statistics. As a professional student, as a research fellow, I ask, what makes the statistical figures of the Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria wrong? We cannot say that the percentages given are wrong. It all depends on the factors considered in calculating, in computation. Now we have not been told about the professor you are referring to abroad. What did he consider as the constituent elements? So if you do not, this is not like the Newton argument that action and reaction are equal or opposite. No, scientifically yes. But when it comes to social science, it is the factor, the dynamics, the elements, what you consider in computing that matter. If you do not look at the same factors in computing, then you cannot have the same result. I want to rely more on the statistics given by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics than rely. But for comparative reasons, we can look at that. Because to assume that the figures given abroad are likely to be correct, that is still hypothetical.
Well, I mean, what we can say is that it's good that figures are being given. Once upon a time in this country, nobody gave figures. We were planning without data, but at least we have something to work with. Whether it is accurate or not is for the statisticians and the economists to determine. And meanwhile, for those who are interested in the World Cup, it is 2-2, as at this moment on this show. Kylian Mbappe scored 2 goals, one from a free kick, one from a penalty in 90 seconds. So history is being made. The two professors, please, let's let's take one more topic,
yes,
so that we can be part of that global drama that is taking place.
Okay.
Because history is being made today, in the world of football. But let's take this subject. Nigeria's Inspector General of Police, Usman Baba, has claimed that those he calls failed politicians and separatist groups, such as the indigenous people of Biafra and Yoruba Nation agitators, are working to disrupt the 2023 elections. This was contained in the Inspector General's presentation during the sitting of the House of Representatives Ad hoc Committee investigating attacks on the facilities of the Independent National Electoral Commission. At the same forum, the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, declared that the commission will recover from recent attacks on its facilities and conduct the 2023 elections. Professor Akinterewa, let me start with you. The same INEC chairman has said, look, this is a major threat to INEC. Attacks in 5 different states. Some of those attacks, 3 in 4 weeks. And it looks like there's no end to it. Generators are stolen or destroyed. Ballot boxes are taken. INEC facilities are destroyed, imposing a regime of fear on the electoral umpire ahead of the 2023 electoral process. What's your take? Do you think that this would derail the elections? Or is the Inspector General of Police himself expressing utter helplessness?
It is not the attack on INEC facilities that constitutes a threat or that can derail. What has the great potential to derail is basically the mere fact that you call some people failed politicians. Because when you talk about failed politicians, that means you know the politicians. You know those who have succeeded, and you know those who have not succeeded. So when you are talking about failed politicians, you have an idea of the identity. So for an Inspector General of Police to come out to say failed politicians, then IPOB, then Yoruba Nation agitators, and all those people are likely to derail. No. What will derail is that you know the truth and you are not fighting You are not fighting the failed politicians. So if you are not fighting your enemy and then you are just speculating, please, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Okay, Professor Awurawo, as briefly as you can make it, so that we take just one more topic.
Okay. The violence is well known. We are all aware of the attacks on INEC facilities in the last couple of months, and we also know from previous elections that people use this atmosphere of fear to try to subvert the electoral process. They try to go and cause trouble in the stronghold of the opponent so that they will not be able to vote, and that gives them an advantage. We know that all of this has happened over time. The comments by the Inspector General of Police, I didn't really expect it. Since they already know that it's IPOB, Yoruba agitators and fake politicians, they should just focus their attention on those so that these elements don't constitute a problem to the election. We have already, concerned people have drawn attention to the violence and all security forces to, be more up and doing in tackling it. Since the IG statement indicates that they now know who the perpetrators are, then it makes the job a lot easier. They should just focus, they should talk less, and do more. Focus on, all of these and ensure that violence does not threaten the forthcoming elections.
Okay, we have just a few minutes to go, but let's take this subject very quickly. Still on Thursday this week, a train plying the Abuja-Kaduna rail line crushed a principal accountant with the finance department at the NTA Channel 5, Selimota Idowu Suleiman, at the Chikakore axis of Kubwa in Abuja. Selimota was on her way to work when the incident occurred at about 10 o'clock in the morning. It is reported that Selimota, who was driving, attempted to cross the rail line as the train advanced on high speed. Eyewitnesses spoke about what happened. Viewer discretion is advised. So rest in peace. Professor Awurawo, I thought we were told by the Minister of Transportation that all precautions have been taken and safety and security have been assured on this same Abuja-Kaduna train line. And now this tragedy, within a week after the reopening of that line. What is wrong with us? Professor Awurawo, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Well, it is obvious that the safety that the minister promised, is not there. Like everybody has said in the last couple of days, those intersections, there's usually a way they are manned such that, if a train is coming, the person who is manning it has the information, or the people manning it have information, and then they ensure that nobody crosses while the train goes before the thing is open again. That's the usual practice. I was really surprised that there were intersections that were so open like that someone could just be on the train on the track while the train comes with speed, and anything can happen. It's unfortunate that this has happened, and that it will take the death of someone for the Railway Corporation and the Minister of Transportation to take action. And what we are urging is that they should ensure that this never happens again. They should do the old way, where there is this protection of all intersections, such that nobody crosses the rail line while a train is coming. That should be done very quickly, so that a tragedy like this never occurs again.
Okay, quickly, Professor Akintenuwa, we have just a few minutes to go.
David Bimbola Balogun is circulating one scientific information trying to explain what may be responsible for the accident. He's now trying to say that, the tracks, the rail tracks are ferromagnetic. And once the car, tries to cross, then everything will be magnetized and the engine will cease in such a way that even getting out of the car will be impossible. Trying to give that. And when we look at this, which type of car will have this electromagnetic something that when you now get there, you will not be able to quickly move away. Reports have it that 5 minutes to the arrival of the train, Suleiman Idowu was crossing. Why should that be at that particular time? Why wouldn't you look at that? As a matter of fact, Balogun gave us some calculations that if a train is moving at a velocity of 100 something, well, you are only taking a risk. And in this particular case, the death is unfortunate, but let's see how the government can prevent a recurrence.
Well, let's see how government can prevent a recurrence. Professor Akintenewa, you cannot be more correct. Thank you very much, and thank you, Professor David Awurawa. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, as we jump out of the studio to go and watch whatever remains of the France versus Argentina final in the World Cup. And thank you very much for watching. Now, I'll go and watch football.